Sports TV will never be the same thanks to the contributions that my guest has done in his career. Jerry Steinberg, known as the godfather of Fox Sports. He was one of the founding fathers there, worked with the greats in David Hill and Ed Goren and beyond. And then you go way back to the start of ESPN, and he was there as well. We're going to talk about his professional life, learn more about him on a personal level, and we're going to highlight him in a really positive way. This is the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, and I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. So it was 2015, Jerry, when you were inducted and you made your speech for the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And you said something during that speech that caught my eye, and that was, you've lived two lives in one. What do you mean by that?
Well, I had a 25-year run with drugs and alcohol, and then I got sober. And once I got sober, I was given the blessing and the gift of a big life. And that's what I meant when I've been fortunate and blessed to be able to live two lives in one lifetime. So that's essentially what I meant. You all know about a lot of pieces of my second life, not hardly anything about my prior life, but it's like I made a transition from an alternate universe to this universe and never looked back. So it's I'm fortunate, man, very fortunate.
37 years sober, you never look back. But if you were, where do you see yourself in that first life having to be strongest and relying on that strength towards the rest of your life and beyond?
You know something, I never really, in the middle of all that craziness and insanity, I never thought about the rest of my life. It was just today. What do I have to do to get through today, right? And oddly enough, when I got sober, one day at a time became the credo for my recovery, right? And so it same thing, different environment, different circumstances, but it's it applies at a totally different level.
When was that moment when you made up your mind, Jerry, and you said, I am not going back to life number one. I'm going life number two, and that is it from now on?
I got a lot of pressure from a lot of people, and I was really crazy, and I was my oldest son was visiting me from Los Angeles, and he said to me, I'm afraid you're going to die. And I said, leave me alone. You're going to bring me down. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Right. And he said it to me again the next day. Right. And I said, I think I got a problem. It was never a problem for me. It was a lifestyle. And that was the quantum shift, the big change for me, that change in direction that took me to my present life.
That shift has not only taken you to your present life, but you've had so much success in that second life. You started during the early days of ESPN, and I want to touch on that and certainly what you've done over the years since at Fox. But how do you think the way your brain was wired made it that when you got sober, that not only were you going to attack the sports TV industry in a big way, but you were going to do incredible things?
I grew up in the Bronx, 8 blocks from Yankee Stadium, right?
Wow.
So I was a crazy fan. I never had any talent as an athlete, but I knew all the batting averages and the stats and all that stuff, right? And so when I got to TV, I looked at it, and when I was a kid, I was a tinkerer. I was always taking stuff apart and putting it back together. So I had that other thing. So when I got to sports TV, my vision was as a fan, you know. So what, you know, whatever technical innovations we got involved in, and I've had a knack of looking at technologies that from other industries and say, wow, this would be really cool in television, right? And but my vision was always as a fan, you know, like back to a kid watching the Gillette Cavalcade of Sports on a 9-inch black and white set, right? And or going to a baseball game and watching baseball games or NFL games or hockey or whatever, basketball. You know, my vision was always, you know, what's fun to see in a living room through the screen. Because I mean, you know, at whatever the network was, ESPN, Fox, doesn't matter. Our customer is the guy in his living room. You know, the sales guys could deal with the advertisers, you know, and you know, but that, you know, to me, our customer and the advertiser's customer was the guy on his couch, sitting in the living room, watching a ball game. You know, what does he want to see? What could make that experience more exciting, more compelling, you know, more, you know, more engaging, you know, David would always say our thing was to bring the viewer closer to the playing field.
David Hill and Ed Gorin, you've always said, and they've always talked about how what allowed them to have such an incredible run and continue, both of them themselves, to do great things is how they're not afraid of making mistakes. Having that sort of mindset when you were with them at Fox, how do you feel like that made you get the most out of you?
Well, first of all, they challenge you to be different, right? Both of them. Also, you're not afraid of making mistakes, right? So if you try 10 things, right, and 5 are really stupid, right? I mean, some of the dumbest shit ever, right? but 5 are really cool. You're a 500 hitter. Where do 500 hitters end up?
So what's the tackiest idea that you thought up that now you can laugh at?
Well, listen, we got involved in 3D. That turned out to be a fiasco. You know, it laid a foundation for artificial intelligence and stuff today that's gotten really cool. But that was, you know, that became an exercise that actually went nowhere. Nobody cared.
When
It became a science. It was a science project, and it stayed a science project.
When you were with ESPN and then backtracking, there were a lot of people that looked at ESPN and didn't think it was going to amount to what it was or nearly be as successful as it has turned out to be. You were with them in the early days. We see how they've taken over sports in so many different ways, but people don't understand the humble beginnings of ESPN. Being there and seeing it from the very start, how humble were those beginnings from your
So
perspective?
we talked about this earlier. So they couldn't figure out whether or not they wanted us to move to Bristol, Connecticut, or to go to the airport and fly to the remote, right? I would rather go to Baghdad than move to Bristol, Connecticut. So you know, it was just, but it was such a mom and pop thing. Chet Simmons was the boss. He was one of the founders, who later became a dear friend and a mentor many years later to me. God bless him. So we were at some Holiday Inn and we had no car. I went to the office and said, listen, you know, you got to get us a car, because all you could do here is go to the A&P and watch them unload the boxes. That's after that, you're in a lot of trouble, right? So they said, well, take that station wagon, right? So I go take this, I look in the glove box to see where the registration is, right? And it was Harriet Simmons, Chet's wife's station wagon. That's the kind of mom and pop place it was in the beginning.
You broadcasting bowling in those early days, take us into what that
Well,
was like setting that
we
up.
did a bowling show on the West Coast right after the volcano erupted. And there was so much sand and grit in the air. They had the whatever the bowling association is, they had these things to test the sand and the grit on a bowling alley. So we had a couple of shows canceled. Mount St. Helena's, that was the and then we go from the bowling alley to University of Texas to do a NCAA football game. I mean, it was crazy. It was fun. It was crazy.
What is the wildest environment, craziest, most hectic, maybe even most dangerous that you have been behind in terms of putting on a broadcast in a certain location?
Well, I worked for the Dan Rather show in the first Gulf War, and there was Scud missiles going off all over the place, and that was kind of scary because the sirens go off. You'd have to put on, like suits, gas suits, and hazmat, whatever the hell they were at the time, and that was stressful and scary. I mean, we did the World Series right after 9/11, and the city was still on fire. That's my town, and that was really emotional, and frightening. I've been all over the world, and it's just, but those two kind of stick out for me right away.
Where were you on 9/11?
I was here in LA, getting ready to start postseason baseball, right? And we did games 1 and 2 in Phoenix, and then it got postponed, and we went to New York, and this is an emotional thing for me because we're doing game 3 of the 2, right after 9/11, and I grew up in that neighborhood. We had this guy working for us, Lenny the cop, right? He was Chuck Schumer's chauffeur at the time. He was a Gold Shield detective.
Wow.
So he was working for us, and he took me down to Ground Zero that day, flashed the badge, and took me on to the, and those are my people, man. And I mean, it was. I think about it now, I get choked up. So we go back to the ballpark, right? And the president is there. It took forever to get the fans in because of the security and the metal detectors. And Derek Jeter's warming up President Bush behind the dugout because he said to Bush, President Bush, excuse me, he said, "You got to throw from the mound. The whole world's watching." And I'm standing on the steps of the dugout, and I realize that night, Michael Jordan was playing his last game in Madison Square Garden. There was an NFL game in the Meadowlands, and we were doing this World Series Game 3. And I realized that this thing of ours, this thing that we do, TV sports, is now the first healing thing for an entire country and a big part of the world. And I'm standing on the steps of the dugout, and I just lose it, man. I start to cry. It was too much. You know what I mean? And once I got over that, I realized that, wow, this is really special. This is really cool, and that I'm so blessed to be part of this thing. It's something I never forget, or never will forget.
Where does that moment rank for you?
Way up there. That's about as, that's way up there.
What else is way up there?
Oh, Jesus. Being a Yankee fan and being part of that run that Joe Torre, Derek Jeter run. You know, every, you know, you know, because I'm a fan. So the Super Bowl in Glendale, Arizona, when the Giants won, you know, we did the great TV and, you know, wow. You know, the helmet catch and all that stuff, man. It was just, that was special.
The poster behind you with Muhammad Ali.
My
How does
friend
that
Leon,
resonate?
my friend Leon, who just passed recently, directed that movie.
Wow.
Leon Guest. And it's, you know, it's one of the great. So Leon's just a regular guy, directs this movie. It took forever, right? And because he was in litigation with Lloyd Price and Don King, and you know, and somebody bailed it out, and Polygram made the movie, and so he wins an Oscar, right? And we're watching this because I know the backstory. The backstory is as crazy as the movie, and we're watching this thing, and you know, watching Leon win the Oscar, and we just lose it. We're crying, Joanne and I, and it turns out Leon, Polygram decides to send him on a promo tour of Europe, and another friend who's in the jewelry business ends up on the same plane. Leon goes on a plane with a shopping bag with the Oscar in the shopping bag, going to sit on a plane with this Academy Award statue in this shopping bag, getting on a plane to go to Paris to do press.
What is and off that, over your career, what is the most unbelievable thing that happened to you from the perspective of you pulling something off from a broadcast perspective, a production standpoint, that the viewer at home could not even imagine what you had to do to get something on air, or something you were able to do that the casual TV watcher would say, how in the world did you pull that off?
You know, there's so many, you know, there's so many things that are so challenging when they're happening, and the, you know, and you just, you know, if this is if this is the journey you choose to take for your life, that's what you do. No is not an answer. I can't do it is not an answer, and you just get it done. You know, and there's so many of those. You know, I remember the generator blowing up at the when we had the college championship. I thought, oh my God, this is it, Elizabeth, this is the big one, right? And we figure it out. You know, you know, I was talking the other day. We did the NFC Championship, Giants and Green Bay Packers, in, you know, in, I guess it's 2006 when the Giants won the Super Bowl, or 2007, I don't remember. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and I'm in the gym on the bike, right? And Troy Aikman is in a treadmill next to me, and I get a phone call. Of course, it was like 40 degrees below zero. I've never been so cold in my life. I get a phone call that the generator just blew up. What do we do, right? And I must have turned white, because Troy looks over and he said, Jerry, you okay? And I said, I'm not sure, right? And somehow we worked it out. You know, the guys got the call. They went there, they switched it to shore power, and we had a great game. And, you know, it was, you know, it was horribly cold. I remember we brought a glass of water to Jimmy Johnson at the desk, and that froze, right? So it was, you know, that we pulled that off under those conditions was amazing. But that's what TV people do every day.
You brought up the fact that you were working out. People who don't know you, you've run a marathon or 2 or 3 or 4.
5.
Or 5 or 5 to get it. In essence, you have had to withstand the conditions of running just a little bit more than 26 miles. How do you think what you put your body through in life, number one, helped you deal with running marathons and the marathon of your career, in a sense?
The life lesson that I learned from running marathons is the only person I really have to compete with is me. because it's this solitary effort, and you don't quit. I just, I mean, the nicest thing people say to me is that you don't quit. You got no quit in you, and you just power through it no matter what it is.
Jerry Steinberg is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. When somebody says that you're the godfather of Fox Sports, what is your response?
I don't know. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's just, it's stuff, that people that write stuff right. I guess because I'm from the Bronx and I got a New York accent or something like that. But that, sometimes it's kind of cute and cool, but it's, I have no idea what that really means. I've done this for a long time. It's a blessing and a gift, but all that other stuff
How do you want, and I'll leave you with this final question. Jerry Steinberg is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How do you want people to perceive your career?
I provide, that my vision was the vision of a fan. It's like, I mean, we've just lost John Madden, right? John Madden's magic was that he was sitting on the couch next to you, right? And you were watching the game with your friend, right? He didn't get into X's and O's. If you've watched football for your entire life and you play fantasy and do all that stuff, you have no idea what an A gap or a B gap is, right? But you're afraid to say it because your friends will think you're afraid your friends will think you're an idiot, right? John Madden never put that pressure on people watching a football game. John Madden just made you comfortable in your own house, like he was sitting on the couch next to you. So when you ask me about me, I would love to be, that we provided that kind of vision for the guy in his living room. So the game was comfortable, and we made it engaging, when we first got baseball, all you ever heard in life, if you watched baseball, was the announcers and the crowd. We mic'd everybody. We put mics in the grass. You heard the bat crack. You heard the outfield yell, "I got it, I got it, I got it." You heard Peyton Manning say, "Omaha, Omaha, check, check, check," right? That's what, so all of a sudden, the guy in his living room is right there in the middle of it. We brought in high-speed cameras so we could slow down the replays and make it, so you could actually see what happens, in slow motion. We brought in high-speed cameras and made it even better. So I would, to this day, I've been to a lot of Super Bowls. The ones that weren't our show that I just had to go to because you just have to show up and see what the other guy's doing and what's going on. I would leave Saturday night and come home and watch it on TV.
Wow.
I mean, because if there's 22 guys on the field, there's a camera in every one of them, plus the officials, plus, so, by the time you get finished, you got 112 cameras, right? You can't, even from the greatest owner's box at the stadium, you turn around, you're watching it on TV anyway, because all the TV's in the so that we bring the viewer close to the playing field, create an environment that just brings you in the middle of the action.
Having done that, you've seen other networks copy you, and I'm sure that imitation is the best form of flattery. And I'd be remiss not to ask you, as we wrap this up, a question about John Madden. And you talked about one of his great strengths, and that is feeling like the common fan knows what's going on out there and his ability to break things down, simplify, and then just being such that warm personality that everybody seemed to want to gravitate towards. But in you getting to know him better than the average fan, in your personal in runnings with him, what's an underappreciated part of John that say the general public doesn't know, but those who were close with him saw?
Well, the thing about John, even after, so even after I retired, I would go to Indianapolis to the game, and John and Dick Ebersol, they would be at the Conrad Hotel, and John would hold court in the hotel lobbies. And to just sit there and listen to John tell stories, it was mesmerizing. If you had to go someplace and do stuff, it was hard to tear yourself away. He was that, I mean, that was the kind of thing to be privy to that not everybody else is privy to. And that was a gift and a blessing.
A gift and a blessing, also being able to share your story and have you on. Jerry Steinberg, I'm Bryan Fenley. Really appreciate you taking a dive back into your career. Certainly so many more stories, and maybe we'll do a part 2 if you have time, but
I would love that.
Yeah.
This is fun.
And the inspiring part of it as well, how you have turned your life around and have done so much good in this world. That's something that everybody needs to see. And I appreciate you taking the time and making this happen and coming
Well,
on.
now now you're a neighbor. You're
Yes, I'm a neighbor.